Well, I've been aware for some time. The organisation, the Interparliamentary Alliance China, which I set up and co-chair now, we've been discussing this. We had a meeting, and all the countries from Japan to America that are members of it have all been pressing their governments to do the same. The problem we've got is I think America will do it, but the UK should have done it weeks ago. We've been asking the UK government to boycott the Winter Olympics in China because of the appalling abuse, not just of the Uyghurs, but remember they broke the agreement, the international agreement we had with China on Hong Kong. They've now been arresting Hong Kong peaceful Hong Kong democracy campaigners. They occupied the South China Seas. They've killed Indian soldiers on their border. And they've been putting Tibetans in forced labor camps. It goes on, smashing Christian churches. This is a regime that is brutal and does not believe in the concept in any shape or form of human rights or the rule of law. So we should have boycotted these on any of those, but particularly now on what we believe is genocide of the Uyghur. And at the same time, the Americans do as well, although the British government refuses to acknowledge that, which is very sad.
Thrown into the mix that the real concern about Peng Shuai, the tennis player, the remarkable action by the Women's Tennis Association, the apparent inaction of the International Olympic Committee. This is all turning into a right mess, isn't it?
It is. I mean, yet if we didn't have enough on the list of terrible abuses that I was just giving you then Peng Shuai's disappearance for a period of time, followed by this rather ridiculous statement that was made, which was quite clearly done under duress, was enough in itself to want to boycott the Winter Olympics. But I'm very pleased, and I must say I'm proud of the WTA for standing up for her rights and refusing to have any tennis competitions in China. And of course, as ever, the ATP, rather like the International Olympic Committee, find all sorts of wriggly excuses. It's always about we must engage to make sure that things change. The honest truth is we've been engaging, as they say, with China over all these sort of abuses, but nothing ever happens. China goes on cracking down on almost anybody it chooses. And that's the real problem. They don't even, by the way, sign up properly to COP26 and their requirements to net zero. So I don't know exactly what it is that we seem to be achieving with China, but China seems to be getting away with literal murder at the moment. And, by the way, threatening Taiwan with invasion, which I just wonder any other country in the world that did this and they'd already be on the naughty step, at least there, but not with China, apparently.
I just wonder, a diplomatic boycott we're expecting, not a sort of full boycott. Would you actually be asking for further action to be taken that would actually potentially damage the Olympics, but then the country further?
Well, I've always argued two things. First of all, over a year ago, I argued that we should be looking to, first of all, move the Winter Olympics. But the Olympic Committee decided not to do that. So I then said, look, the least we can do is that countries themselves should not attend. That is to say, their ministers and their officials, including diplomatic officials, should not attend the Winter Olympics and make it very clear this is because of Chinese behavior, that we cannot allow them to have this great show, as it were, for them, free and without any punishment, as it were. When it comes to athletes, it's up to, I think, individuals to decide what to do. They must make that decision. If they choose not to go, then all well and good. But if they don't, well, that's a matter for the Olympic Committee. I would love the International Olympic Committee to themselves say enough's enough, we're not doing this anymore because of their behavior. But just like the ATP, they seem to have no guts at all. Whereas the Women's Association, the WTA, are really courageous, and I take my hat off to them.
Well, hang on. I mean, the International Olympic Committee, indeed the British government, money talks. It's about money.
Well, you may yet be right. And, of course, we know that's one of the major reasons why governments fall shy of actually saying anything very specific about the Chinese government. But, when it comes down to it, I thought we, back in the 1930s and into the 40s, we learned our lesson then. When a country practices genocide, when it abuses, controls and invades territory, when it throws its military might around and threatens its neighbors, don't we need to do something about that instead of actually kowtowing to them like we've been doing? I thought the lessons of the 1930s, without taking the right action, which ended up with over 60 million people dying in the world as a result of the Second World War, I thought these were major lessons to have learned, and it seems like we've learned absolutely nothing from these kind of areas. And it's time that we stood up to China and said, this is appalling behavior. You cannot go on like that and expect to trade freely and be in the world community until you change your ways.
Does a diplomatic boycott actually have?
Well, the funny thing about dictatorial regimes like China and Russia and others, and bear in mind the threats we're getting now from Belarus, from Russia and from China, are all to do with borders, disputes, crackdowns on their own peoples. But the funny thing about them is that they very much love the idea of that spectacle, to be able to showcase China as an important, or Russia or whatever, as an important member of the world community, and to show just how wonderful they are. They hate it if they get criticism from outside, and they react viciously. I mean, there's 5 of us in the House of Commons that have been, and in the House of Lords, that have been sanctioned by China, myself included, for criticizing them over what we called it the genocide of the Uyghur. There's also Americans that have been sanctioned, and European members of IPAC that have been sanctioned. So, you know, they even with ordinary people like myself, they seem to take it very hard and they hate it. But when a country says, I'm not going there because of the Winter Olympics, and if all the countries do the same in terms of their government and their officials, then they will hate that too, and it will be a body blow to them. Internally, Chinese people would ask, what's all that about? And so it just begins. You've got to make these statements because they hate them so much that we know they have an effect.
Quick one on something a little closer to home. I mean, have you ever seen cocaine taken in the lavatories in the House of Commons or the Lords?
Well, no. If I had, I would certainly have reported the individuals to the authorities and particularly to the police. I haven't, although I have heard stories going back over a long time about people doing that. I don't know whether some individuals who shouldn't be in there manage to go in there and do that. If they do, I have to tell you, even though we're protected by privilege for the most part in the building, if anybody is taking banned and outlawed drugs, they must go through the full rigor of the law. And if I was to find them, I certainly would.
Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, it's good to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Pleasure.